Right, hello and welcome back to Sports That Made Me. We've got a really intriguing episode today, one that I personally think is going to be extremely interesting and one that a lot can be learnt from. But before we welcome our guest today, as you can see, there's a new face in the studio with
Hello.
me. Niamh, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the podcast. How are
Thank
you?
you for having me. I'm very good. Excited to be here.
Yeah, if you could just give a little brief description of who you are, just kind of a little summary.
Okay, so I'm also doing sports broadcasting masters with Will, but maybe I know a bit more about like females in sport than you. So I'm here to give my girl brain today to this episode.
There we go. And obviously with the sports broadcasting masters, what sort of stuff have you been doing? Is any presenting or?
Yeah, mainly
along those
doing
lines?
a bit of presenting, reporting, also producing, directing. It's all going on. Also got my own podcast with Georgie. So yeah.
So busy girl, that
Busy
one.
girl.
Always working. But that brings us on to our guest, a former rugby player turned referee. She's played in England, France and Australia. So I'm delighted to welcome Holly Wood to the podcast. Thank you for coming on. And most importantly, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure. Yeah, all good. Back into the working week from a game that was rained off at the weekend. So actually had a bit of a break, which was nice, which I don't normally get. But yeah, heading back into the week and then obviously refereeing again this weekend, which should be good.
100%. What was the game that was called off?
So I was supposed to be at Birmingham Moseley against Isha, so National One Men's. But I received video at about 8:30 in the morning, and the pitch was under about 2 inches of water. So, so yeah, that was called off. But my husband referees, and his game was still on. So I went to lovely Harpenden for some level 5 rugby,
Nice.
which was all right.
I was going to say the weather here has been absolutely awful. Was it
been
Storm
shocking.
Darragh or
Dara.
something? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it hit you guys harder than us. So
Yeah.
I'm surprised it was called off up with you. So yeah.
yeah, I think like their pitch just doesn't drain very well. So, but yeah, like any teams that are on all weather pitches, they or like Premiership teams that have good drainage and good groundsmen, they also went ahead.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so with you then, Holly, if you could just, obviously I don't want to say kind of what you do, I kind of want to get you to say what you do. If for everyone listening, what exactly is it that you do? How, like, if you give you a little bit of background about what your job like role entails, and if you kind of had to describe yourself to someone new, how would you do that?
If I had to say what I do, I don't know, 3 words, I'd say I wear many hats. So yeah, I'm at a stage of my refereeing career where hopefully a full-time contract will be on the horizon. But yeah, I work full-time alongside it at the moment. So when I say I wear a lot of hats, it's weekday Holly. Week evening Holly's training, doing analysis for rugby, and then on the weekend refereeing, sometimes Friday night, Saturday night, or Saturday and Sunday. So yeah, pretty busy girl, but yeah, we move.
And then, so obviously you said about the rugby. How did you get into rugby? Was there any, like, was it always rugby for you, like growing up, or was there potentially like, other sports and things like that?
Yeah, so I was a bit of a sport billy, literally did everything. I suppose my main sport growing up was netball, and that's mostly because my mum played, and I used to play with her when I was a teenager and everything, and I was obsessed with netball. But then my mum started playing rugby when I was about 13, 14. And so I was just kicking a ball alongside on the rugby pitch like every weekend, and there was no girls team at the club, and I was desperate to play. So me and one of the girls from school, we set up a rugby team at that club. So started playing rugby. Stopped playing when I was 27, and then yeah, picked up the whistle during my last season when I was playing for Toulouse in France, and that's only because my husband put me on a course and made me do it. Like I had no desire to referee at all. Like it didn't interest me. Like I wanted to go back playing netball, like probably do like a few triathlons in the summer and stuff. But yeah, he put me onto a refereeing course, and here I am.
Well, there you go. Something's always happened for a reason.
That's really interesting, though.
Yeah.
That you said about your mum playing rugby, because I feel like when you grow up, like as a woman in sport, it's only really like netball or like hockey that we like have the influence of. So do you think if your mum hadn't like started playing rugby or like taken you to a rugby like pitch, that you would have just carried on with netball and maybe just fit into those like female stereotypes?
Yeah, I absolutely would have. Like, I didn't really know what rugby was until Mum started playing. Like, I remember like the 2003 World Cup final, and we had like a house party when it was on, when England won, obviously. And I just remember I was like 11, and everyone was just screaming, "Pass the ball to Johnny, pass it to Johnny," for the drop goal. And I was like, what are these people on? Like, I don't even get what they're talking about. And then, yeah, a couple of years later, my mum started playing. But my granddad used to play professional rugby league, like back in the day, and so rugby was always a huge part of my mum's upbringing. And they always used to have, like, when he then became coach at his rugby club and everything, they always used to have overseas players like living with them and stuff. So my mum used to live and breathe rugby league, and she always wanted to play rugby. And then when the opportunity came along, because a couple of the girls that she played netball with wanted to play rugby, that's when she started playing in her 30s. But I would not have played at all if it wasn't for my mum playing.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And what specifically was it then about rugby that kind of made you like fall in love with it? Because I know for me, obviously, like, you know, my dad and stuff like that, it's very like, predominantly like rugby based family as well. But I wouldn't say like I'm in love with the sport. I was always more in love with football. So what was it for you that kind of really like drew you into rugby and made you fall in love with that sport?
I think I was probably quite aggressive when I was younger. But I used to channel it into sport. Like, it wasn't like I played basketball, like ran. Like I honestly, I did every sport growing up, like even on the water polo team at school.
Really?
But like I used to play football as well. But like part of my game was that I was super competitive and aggressive, but I could channel that aggression. And then it just so happened that I was all right at a lot of sport growing up. So yeah, I think it was everything that rugby encompasses, like the values that it has, that kind of aligned with me growing up, because I was always the captain of team and everything. So that leadership element, the teamwork, and then that I could just hit people. I love that. I just liked killing and stuff and bumping people, and that was that.
There you go.
And then, so you then obviously you said you started with the own team with like your friends as well.
Yeah.
Was that kind of the start of then your career? Like, how did that kind of then as a player like progress into playing for like Harlequins and moving over to France? And
so I definitely did start there, and it was just club rugby that we played, and like we went to our school and said, look, a lot of the girls, like, we started playing rugby outside the school, like, can we play for school? And our head of PE, Mr. Forsyth, was there, like, girls will absolutely not play rugby at this school. And I remember, like, we won, like, we were an unbeaten team, and then he started like announcing in an assembly, the XRs, the girls have won this tournament, that tournament. And we always just sit there being like, hold on a sec, you said that we can play rugby, and now you're celebrating us, like, this is a match up. So yeah, it was like always club rugby that I played. And then when I went to university, I went to Portsmouth Uni and studied history and politics. My mum bought me a pair of ASIC net burners, and then she bought me a pair of rugby boots, because it's my summer. My birthday, like the summer that I went to uni, and she said, you can only play one sport now, you've got to pick. So I went to uni, went to Freshers' Fair, and back, like, this was like 2010, all the netballers had fake tan on, loads of makeup, massive hair, and then the rugby girls were just offering out free snake bite at the desk.
Oh my God. That was savage to me.
I'm going to rugby, that's a bit more of me. So yeah, then started playing for my uni, and then I started playing rugby league in my second year, like in during the summer. Like there was a local team that were playing rugby league, so started playing that. We won like the Southern Conference, and then in my last year at uni, I was playing rugby league for England, but then I was playing in the Premiership for Richmond in rugby union. So was doing both, and then I got selected for the World Cup, so played in the Rugby League World Cup in 2013, and then was carried on playing for Richmond, and then from there it's a really had a long career, a bit older, but I'll just go through a timeline for you, so I don't bore you. So I basically like came back from the Rugby League World Cup, still playing at Richmond, did my ACL, so it was out for a year. And then I came back, started playing again for Richmond. Then we won a couple of premierships. Then I went out to Australia to play for a team called Waverley, that's based in Bondi. And then when I was in Bondi, the Richmond head coach was a woman called Karen Findlay. She's a bit of a trailblazer. Like she had like 100 caps for Scotland. She was like one of the best, most qualified female rugby coaches in the country. She's like she was chief inspector of the Metropolitan Police. She was like the most fierce lady, and I was absolutely petrified of her. She basically gave me a call and said, "Look, Holly, women's rugby is going to start taking off. They're going to start franchising the teams. Richmond don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to put any money in, but Harlequins are going to set up a team. And like, are you in? Like, I'm going to take some of the girls with me from Richmond." Bearing in mind, we just come off the back of winning the Premiership. We just won the National Cup. And I was there like, right, who's in? And she reeled off like 5 of like my best mates at the club. I was there like, right, I'm in. So came back from Australia, then started playing at Harlequins, and then we won the last season of the Premiership in that year, and then it became the Premier 15s, which what we know now as the PWR. So the PWR has gone through, we're in our third cycle of like the 3 years of franchises. So I played in the first 2, like the first 5 years, like 6 years of that. When I got to about 27, I was like, right, I'm falling out of love with the sport. Like if in my head, like if you're not high performance, if you're not tapping on the door of England, for me, I'm like, what's the point? I'll move on. So I was like, right, I'm going to do what every male player does and go out to France and play and just enjoy a season of actually earning money, and then living in the sunshine. So I signed for Toulouse, knowing that would be my last season, and I was at peace with that. But then it was at that point that I met my now husband, who's then my boyfriend. He did a refereeing course, and then just became an absolute nose and was like, right, I think you should do your refereeing course. So came back for a weekend to see him from France. And I was like, oh, what have we got planned? A nice romantic weekend away. He was like, you're down at Trojans doing the refereeing course. So then went off to Trojans for 2 days and then came back. He was like, well, and I was like, yeah, I love it. You were right again. So then I saw out that season with Toulouse, and then COVID hit. I managed to referee like 2 games before COVID, and then after COVID, like kind of like hit the ground running with refereeing really, and then yeah, it's kind of taken off from there.
And so obviously you said you played England with rugby league, and then you were still playing union as well. Was that a tough decision to kind of choose one of the two, or was it kind of more like actually it's an easy decision to pick union? Or
it wasn't really, just because of geography. Like I was living down in Portsmouth, and England, they trained at Leeds, so like I was broke, like I had like no money as a student. There was not really any funding the sport. We had to fight to get travel expenses even. So it was just, in terms of geography, it was a pretty easy decision that I would just do the World Cup and then go back to playing union. So yeah, that I think like I was a winger, so the technicalities of the game, like it's pretty similar.
Yeah, I was going to say, were there a lot of
between the two?
Yeah, a lot of like transferable skills between the two, or was it more of like a challenge to adapt? But obviously, you said it was quite an easy transition.
Yeah, it was easy. So it was it wasn't really it's for me, like doing the Rugby League World Cup, obviously it was amazing. It was a massive honour. Like my granddad came to watch me play. He was very proud, being from a rugby league background and all of that. But like I kind of ticked that box, closed that chapter, then went back to union quite quickly.
And then, so with the refereeing, obviously you mentioned as well, was, well, your boyfriend at the time, now husband, that kind of gave you, well, said you're doing it. Was there a lot of female representation on that course, or were you very much like the only female one going into it?
So I think it was a course of like 25 to 30. So I was, there was two females on the course. So there was myself, and then there was a young girl who was 14 who was there with her dad. She plays for Richmond, and I still keep in contact with her. She's at uni now. I think she goes to Bath Uni, but yeah, she's lovely. But she's still playing, but she referees every now and again and wants to go into refereeing after. But yeah, she was the only other female, so I kind of took her under my wing on the course.
That is crazy. Yeah, 2 out of 25. That is.
Yeah.
Was that?
What year would have that been? Like
that was 2019.
2019. Yes, see, it's not even that long ago. And it's. Do you think it would be different now if you did it this year?
I would hope it would be different, but I think like the Impact 25 project and the lead up to the World Cup has a lot to do with that. So like it's now free for females to do that refereeing course, and they've got their target number of getting minimum 500 women as qualified referees, which I believe they have hit, which is great. So I think, there are factors that now there would be more on that course, but I don't think that many, if I'm being honest.
No. And was that kind of, like, I don't want to say like intimidating, but obviously with maybe rugby being kind of more of a traditional male sport, was that going into that course being so outnumbered, or was it just kind of, oh, do you know what, let me show what I can do, and kind of I've never got into, like, I've been involved in rugby like pretty much all my life in it, and like it doesn't really intimidate me. If anything, like I kind of maybe walked in there a bit arrogantly, being like, I play rugby for Toulouse, like I've played for Queen. What have you guys done? Yeah.
Like, I'm the best rugby player here. Like everyone was there, like older people who were like into coaching, there was dads, but there was no like players or ex-players there. So I kind of like had that chip on my shoulder, if you want to call it that.
Well, rightly so as well. I mean, playing for all of those teams.
No, exactly. And I suppose like you always go into those kind of rooms knowing that you're going to be part of the minority. So it shouldn't have been like a shock. And as long as you're like capable in your abilities, then I suppose like that's all that matters, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the guy that led the course, he still messages it to me all the time now. Like, oh, I've seen you reffing here, good luck, blah, blah, blah. I remember who did your course and everything. And I'm like, I will get you tickets one day if I ever do a big game.
He's sweet talking more than anything.
But he was a lovely guy, like ex-Navy. He was great. So there wasn't like a divide as such.
And with obviously you saying you had quite a decent career. With the start of the women's game from when you started compared to how it is now, like what sort of things are there that you've like really noticed that have really improved? Was it maybe more like attitudes, or like the quality, or like there's more interest in it?
Yeah, I would say definitely the quality of rugby. And I'd say that because I went back to Quins a couple of months ago to referee a session, and all the youngsters there and the skill set of like what would be the development team, like a second team compared to the second team when I was playing, like the skill set is so much better now. And it was really nice to see. And then in terms of the difference, so I played 2016 Premiership final, I played for Richmond against Sarries. And it was the first ever televised women's game, and it was on Sky, and the game was played at the Stoop at Harlequins Stadium. And literally there was like our diehard Richmond supporter, like a pocket of like 50 people, and then just like a man and his dog in the stand, and then that was it.
God.
And then the PWR final last season, Sarah Cox refereed that final. The Richmond Sarries, and that was when she had just got her professional contract, so that was 8-9 years ago.
Wow.
And then the PWR final last season, Sarah Cox was in the middle again, and I was on the line. And to run out, and the amount of more bums on seats, and the attention, the media, like obviously social media is like blown up, especially recently with Alona Mar around women's rugby, but just the attention that it got, and the bums on seats in comparison to that final 8 years ago was just completely different.
Would you say, because Alona Ma is like all over my TikTok at the moment,
Yeah.
and I genuinely think that is the first time any form of like female rugby's come up on my social media. And do you feel like that's probably going to be the biggest influence now in like the rugby industry, is that by seeing those female faces on like Instagram and TikTok, that's what's going to drive in more female audiences and maybe inspire the younger generation to play rugby? Do you think that's the main influence?
I hope so. I mean, what she's done and Bristol signed her, I think is genius. Like the amount of focus it's had, and the amount, like, I think sporting stars are always going to get like horrible comments online, but the positivity that she gets far outweighs the negativity that's like professional superstars normally get. Like, I think Bristol Bears following went from 22k to like 51k in like the last week. So like it's incredible what that has done for attention on the sport. So I think the catalyst of her coming over to, especially to the PWR, it's great for our league. And I was watching Cape Town Sevens over the weekend, and I was just thinking, like, how many of those Aussie and Kiwi stars from Sevens, who are stars because Sevens is like the biggest sport in their country, are going to make that switch to 15s because they've seen the attention that she's been getting. So it's like, if she gets picked for the World Cup, like, I'm really intrigued to see what Bristol Bears' attendance is when she first plays in January. It will, I hope other like stars like Charlotte Caslick, I think from New Zealand, like Tyler Nathan Wong, that they'll make that switch to 15s ahead of the World Cup next year.
Yeah, I agree with the I'd like to see the statistics now from like audiences now and then in like January or like next year, to see if that is really like something that's gonna, I don't know, drive the industry and like drive more females into sport. But
yeah, absolutely.
Well, it was recently the attendance record was broken at Twickenham, I believe it was 50. I've got it somewhere here. 58,000 to watch the England-France game last year in the Six Nations decider. So obviously it's come a very long way from when Holly, you were saying about the first like Premiership games there. It's incredible, and like I do think that like they'll sell out that final next year. I think they're already on record ticket sales, and then they're releasing another batch of tickets in February. So it was quite nice actually. I was watching a husband referee the other week, and there was an old boy. He must have been in his 70s, and then he was there like, "Oh, what do you do then?" and blah blah. I said, "Oh, I'm actually a rugby referee." I said, "I'm supporting this referee today." And he said, "You don't get many of them." And then he said, "Oh, I really love the women's game. I went over to New Zealand to the final in 2021." And I was thinking, oh my God, that's so, like, a guy this old going over to New Zealand to watch that women's final is incredible. And then he said, I've already got tickets for 10 games so far. And he said, and then I went into Northampton Saints to try and get tickets for England's first game. And he said there was only standing tickets left available, like there was no seating tickets. So I just think like it's just the amount that the women's game has come on, and you're attracting what would be a non-traditional women's rugby fan, like a 70-year-old man and his wife. I just think it's incredible. And how far do you think it can go in terms of scale, and how quickly do you think it can get to that like massive point?
I think like the women's WSL, when they had that Euros win a few years ago, I think we're tracking, I think by like 1.3% above of where they were before that win at this time on butts and seats in games. And if you look at the WSL now post that Euros win, like it's incredible how much women's football has come on in the last couple of years. So I think if we're tracking just above where they were, like I think we're in a pretty good place.
Definitely, 100%. And something similar has also happened in Wales. Wales qualified for their first Euros.
First women's team to qualify for a major tournament in football, and the last home game was the most amount of bums on seats ever for
Yeah,
a women's match. So yeah, I genuinely do believe that like social media has an influence on that, and as social media grows, I hope that like it can drive more equality and they can be on par with like the men's match with like quicker than what we thought it was going to be because of how quickly social media is growing and things like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the potential is
Yeah.
very, I'd say unlimited. I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then moving obviously back to Holly, when you transitioned from the playing side to becoming a referee, was it an easy transition, or like was there difficulties in that now maybe trying to referee players that you played for or played with, I should say? Does anything of that kind of impact your decisions, or do you take maybe more of like a lenient approach to some things because you've played the game yourself? Like, how does that kind of impact your decision making?
I think ex-players, like we've got like inherent like empathy for the game, and like we want the game to flow. Like I always like approach like, right, how would I want to play this game of rugby? Like, say if I was going back and playing Saracens, like this is how like I would want to enjoy a game of rugby, and how do we get success as a team? So I think like as like an ex-player is always going to bring that element of empathy, and doing what's best for the game that's in front of them. I found the transition like pretty easy. Like a lot of referees will like go through like, right, we'll referee minis at your local club, then you'll do the under 16, under 18s, and then we'll put you into a women's game. And then there's like this big lead up until you do your first ever senior men's game.
Yeah.
And like when I did my course, I was there like I was part of Hampshire Society. Like I came back for a weekend from France, and I was there like, chuck me in a senior men's game. I was there like throw me in the deep end. Like what's the worst that could happen? That I've got a few blokes shouting at me on a Saturday. Like, so what?
Yeah.
So my first game was a senior men's game. It was like level 11. It was my husband was refereeing the first team on the pitch next to me, which was a level 9, and then I was in the second team next to him, and we had a black Labrador at the time, and we just tied her up on the fence in between the pitches. So yeah, I just absolutely loved it, and I think just getting chucking in at the deep end, that was the best way that I was going to learn. Like I've got a pretty like you sink or swim mentality. And then like going back and quite a lot of my mates actually retired last year. But there's still like girls that I played against and still a couple dotted around played with, but yeah, it only helps relationships. Like if I use like Marley Packer, captain of Sarries in England, for example, like we've been on tour together and had beers together, and like I've assistant refereed in games, and she'd given the ref a really hard time, and I've come off thinking Marley just doesn't treat me like that, and then like I referee like her a week later, and she's like nice as pie to me. So I think it just like obviously like you've got to earn an element of respect. And when I first started like refereeing in the women's premiership, for example, like I would have like tough days in the office because I hadn't earned that respect yet as a ref. But yeah, like now it's definitely easy dealing with those personalities in comparison to how some other refs how much stick they get from them.
Yeah. I wouldn't even bring gender into that though, because I feel like if you transition from being a player to a referee, it's a completely different ball game. So you may as well throw yourself into the deep end, because it's not like you're the minority. It's just that you're actually doing something different. So you may as well just learn at the highest level as opposed to just doing what you're used to. So yeah, that's interesting you say that.
I definitely, although bringing like, if you do bring gender into it, I definitely think if I step onto a pitch on a male's game, they're like, bugger, like, how do we treat her? Like, what do we call her? Like, they don't like say anything that I could take the wrong way. And I'm like, guys, just call me sir. Like, I don't really care.
No,
like,
exactly.
Just don't do anything rude. But like being female, like I definitely think works in your favour when you're refereeing like male games. And I feel like you can get away with a lot more like in terms of banter. Like I'll give you one example. Like, I was refereeing like a men's game, and one of the players went down and his nose was like streaming with blood. And then like the guys were like, physio, come on, like we need like one of those like tampon things that we can stick up his nose.
Yeah.
And then I just went, oh, I would help you out, lads, but it's not my time of the month. And they like looked at me in like
Panic.
shock. And I just like walked off giggling. But like obviously like the
Yeah.
bloke or like if they said something similar, like might not get away with it. But yeah, I definitely use it in my favour sometimes.
That's so good. I love that.
Right, so talking, you obviously just mentioned about finding it easier to kind of referee, having been a player. Are there any like differences in the pressure of being the person in the middle compared to just one of the 15? Are the pressures of the game similar, or is it more? Do you feel like there's more of a focus on you because you're the one that has to make the decision, whereas as a team, kind of that pressure gets like spread out through everyone?
Yeah, absolutely that. Like when I talk to people about refereeing, I always say that refereeing is so much harder than being a player. And that is down to the pressure. Like you said, like you can spread it across the 15 when you're on the pitch. If you make a mistake, like you can make up for it on the next one. But if a referee makes a mistake or whatnot, then that's the only thing that really gets remembered post game. Like say if a team has had a narrow loss and you gave something that wasn't accurate, then that all comes down to you. So yeah, like refereeing is a much more high pressure environment. I wouldn't say like it's necessarily like lonely environment as a lot of people think, because there is like the team behind the team, and like obviously you've got your assistant referees. If you're on TV, you've got your TMO. Like there is a good team there, and you've all got each other's backs mostly. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more pressure refereeing, and when you go up those levels, when results matter, if you get given a top of the table game, that those environments, yeah, they are high pressured. So yeah, a lot of prep goes into it, and a lot of coaching throughout the season to get better, but also to be able to deal with those moments as well.
I've actually never even thought of it like that, like you being the one making all the decisions. Is it something you like take home with you, or do you learn not to? Like, do you go home and think about, oh, I had a bit of hate for that, maybe I was wrong? Is that something you think about, or?
Yeah, I used to think about it a lot more. Like if I made like one mistake in a game, I used to dwell on it for about a week and really kick myself and beat myself up constantly. But I had a baby 18 months ago, and now like he's normally at clubs with me, and I just come off the pitch and I'm like, oh, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like I've got bigger things in my life right now.
100%.
And like I see it more like it's just a game of rugby, whereas like before it was like this is a game of life, you know.
Yeah. Nobody's died, you're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
And how, with that kind of the pressure being on you, there's kind of two questions that I want to ask. The first one being about the pressure. How do you deal with pressure yourself? Like, were there certain steps you do maybe before a game to deal with, like, to kind of maybe like de-stress or kind of anything along those lines? What is it that you do?
Yeah, I suppose like I don't really like. I think like pressure and stress and something is something. It's not really something that has. I'm not a very like stressed person. Like I'm quite chilled out normally, and like those high pressure environments, like I love it. Like I do love that pressure. So but like my changing room before, like I'll make sure that my team is briefed. Like we're playing some music. Like I always eat like cake and sweets before games. So I always like make sure that there's goodies there, because I always like to stuff my face before. So yeah, like it's mostly just that like team environment, and like as you move up the levels, like the people that you get put in your team, like your assistant referees and stuff, like they know who you work well with, and like will only appoint you with people who are kind of like-minded or like know how you operate and everything. So the teams that I work with now, like have like a pretty similar mindset. So yeah, I those like there's no like I don't put on one sock before the other. Like I don't have to
Yeah.
do
There's no like
have my lucky
superstitions.
coin for the coin toss. Like I'm not really like that. I'll like find a 20p coin in the bottom of my bag and I'm like, that'll do.
Yeah.
But yes, but it's more like I would say like my not downfall, but what is having to like throw those like things away that I get wrong and I'm moving on pretty quickly because there's quite a quick turnaround between games.
Yeah. I suppose that's something that comes from experience and learning as well. Like you're not going to
Yeah.
automatically fall into a job and then just know how to navigate it straight away. So I suppose it's like any other job really, but yeah, it's interesting that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that.
And then kind of the second point that I wanted to move on to was obviously you mentioned it just then. You are a mum. You got pregnant in 20. You said a couple of years ago, 2022. Would that have been or?
Yeah, and he was born in 23.
And
Oh,
I don't know
then
where the years go.
yeah, and then do you think
imagine.
that's? You said obviously then you go off the pitch and like you see like your kid and everything just is like, wait, like is it that deep? Do you think being a mum has helped you become a better referee in some senses, or do you think maybe it's changed your
Yeah,
decision
I think it
making?
has. Yeah, I think it's given me like a different purpose. Like I refereed until I was 6.5 months pregnant. So yeah, like went quite far, and then like I was back running a couple of weeks after having him. I was back refereeing. Like the season started 9 weeks later, and I was back in the middle. But like I suppose like before, like refereeing is it's a very selfish thing. Like you have to sacrifice a lot of family time, like birthdays, weddings, like there's so much that you have to sacrifice. But I suppose like now where like I grew up on the sideline of the rugby pitch or the netball court, like it's become like a family occasion now rather than it just being like a selfish thing all about me. So yeah, it's I suppose like it's definitely given me a different purpose, and like I want him to grow up seeing role models and female role models and stuff. Because that's what got me into sport and what made me passionate about sport. And I think that's really important for kids growing up.
Yeah. Suppose it's just like another part of your life is just like slotted in and not really like hindered anything. It's just something that you grew up doing. So it's like you get to raise your child the same way. So I suppose that's just a nice thing and not so much like a
Yeah.
added stress or anything. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
nice to hear.
yeah. Like the kid before he turned 1, he'd been to 10 different countries with me
Oh
refereeing.
my,
Like who gets to do
Well
that?
travelled.
His
that's
passport's ridiculous.
insane. Fair
Yeah.
play.
So yeah, where I just think we're so lucky.
Yeah,
And like he's a very lucky little boy.
definitely.
100%.
You realise when he grows up how lucky he
Yeah.
is. No.
And then
Go
there
on.
was a little bit you mentioned in there. You said you continued refereeing whilst for your first 6 months of your pregnancy. How was that? And then what kind of did you keep that as a secret, or was it very much I'm pregnant, I need to tell the RFU, or how did those kind of conversations come about? And
I kept it a secret purely because men in high performance environment, they take their thought process of how their sister, their wife, or women within their organization or their mother, that's how they perceive pregnancy. And women should be wrapped up in cotton wool, and that's how it should
Yeah.
be. But I'm just not like that. Like at the end of the day, like I didn't start getting a bump till I was 5 months. So like for me, like I'm quite fortunate in my body that I've always had like abs and everything. I'm like, this baby's well protected, and plus it's the size of a blueberry at like 3 months.
Yeah.
So like I was pretty like practical about it. But yeah, it's just the stigma attached that men put on women that they should be looked after and wrapped in cotton wool when they're pregnant. And the fact of the matter is, it's not one size fits all. And I think a woman should have to can decide how she should be treated, or how much exercise they do, or how they use their body during pregnancy. And I didn't want anybody from the RFU in a decision making position to put that on me. Like I wanted it to be on my own terms. So when I got to, I think it was like 5.5 months, I started getting a bump. So I was there like, right, I'm going to tell him now, and then I'll ask if I can assistant referee until I'm like, okay, like now I look really fat, like I'm going to stop now. So yeah, that's why it probably, like, I think I managed to do it for so long just because of my body type. And then secondly, I didn't want any people telling me how I should live my life, really, which is what would have happened, I believe.
Exactly. So you know your own body and you know what like you can and can't do. So but however, did you feel as though like if you announced that you were pregnant straight away to the RFU that they had like, I don't know how to explain it, but like some textbook thing that like someone's pregnant, this is what like things like this is the move we have to make. What were there things in place for female referees who do get pregnant, like maternity wise, like leave wise? Do they have like much support or anything? Or
no, there isn't at all, because I was the first person to do it in from like high performance. So then I basically wrote the maternity policy for all match officials from the amateur level up to the professional game, if up until you've been fully contracted for across the country. So yeah, it was nice that I was able to spearhead and implement that, and I think it just highlighted to them like there's a gap here that we have, that it's a bit of like an oh shit moment that they haven't thought of. But like nobody had done it before, you know, like a lot of female match officials will wait until they stop refereeing to have a family. But like I think like I'm a believer that women can do it side by side, and there's so many examples of amazing female athletes now, and I think especially that came out the Olympics of people being a dual athlete and mum, you know. So yeah, I think it's just changing that mindset, but then just making sure that there are policies and procedures in place to support people.
That's actually a huge gap though, because I suppose if you went into like a school or like worked for the NHS, there'd be something in place straight away because they know that they have like females working for them, and there's all of these like policies and rules. What did you base your policy off? Did you have to do like a lot of research, or was it just you kind of knew and took from your experience?
Yeah, so the FA had a maternity policy for referees. So, and they were the only governing body that had it like as an individual sport. But then Sport England also had a policy for fully professional Sport England funded athletes. They had a policy there. So I learnt a lot of it off the FA because that was more like for like. So yeah, it was a pretty good framework to go on. But like the FA's head and shoulders above of where the RFU are in terms of like their participation numbers, the way they think, and everything. So I think their policy was written in like 2018 or something for female match officials. So yeah, I took a lot of it from that.
Yeah.
And do you think those attitudes have kind of changed since then? Like if you were to say now that you were pregnant to the RFU, do you think there would be a difference in maybe, or obviously I don't know how they reacted to it firstly. Was it a good reaction or a bad reaction? And then the second part of my question just being like, if you did it now, do you think things would have changed or progressed since then?
I think that first of all it was a good reaction, and then I was like, oh, I'm pregnant, and I was like, I'm not just pregnant, I'm 5.5 months pregnant. They were like, oh my god, like what's been going on? But like the policy that I wrote states that when a person is comfortable to say so. To be honest with you, I would probably do similar to what I did, and that's purely because I do believe that they would put their own timeline on it, and when they think I should stop. But for me, there's not enough research or case studies in place for them to stipulate that for me. So yeah, I think attitudes have changed in the respect of like, oh, well, that was a good learning. What a good experience that we went through, and we got Holly through that, and she is where she is now. But I still think like they would default to what the old attitudes and ideals would be.
It goes back to that whole thing of, you say like sometimes you step out on a pitch and you could just feel like men like want to bubble wrap you kind of, and like tread carefully and respectfully. I suppose that kind of attitude translates into maternity as well. And when it comes to like female policies, they probably just kind of want to like protect you as much as possible because they're scared of like putting a foot wrong because they can't understand like the female body from their own experiences.
Yeah. Which I get from like if something were to happen, like from an insurance business, like I completely get it. But like depending on how you do it, like they can make it like the woman's choice, you know. So like if you like World Rugby have a bit of a different way of thinking, and like we're working on a maternity policy at the moment. But there was a referee at WXV1 in Vancouver, Julianne Sussman, and she was 5 months pregnant, refereeing in the middle, and you could visibly see that she was pregnant. So there's been like a bit of a catalyst from what I did to what they're doing now, and how like World Rugby are good at making it the woman's choice. But the referee manager at World Rugby, she's a lady called Alhambra Niamh Davies. She was an international referee, and she stopped refereeing to have children, and she said it's one of her biggest regrets. So she doesn't want to, so she wants to do it differently.
Interesting. I'm glad to see they put that policy in place, because it's nice having someone with experience knowing, because regardless of like if you're a female or not making that policy, unless you've actually experienced what it's like to be a ref and pregnant, like you're never going to actually make a policy that is, I don't know, viable and correct and relatable to others. So that's a really good achievement.
Thank you.
And was like with the pregnancy, was there kind of any challenges that you found trying to perform to an elite level whilst being pregnant, or was it kind of just a stroll in the park, so to say? Was there any like anything that kind of impacted it, or was it all just quite?
I think I was very lucky that it was super uncomplicated. I had no issues exercising. Like part of it, I was like, this is the fittest I've like ever felt. Like when I was working out, like I did a lot of CrossFit and everything. I suppose like one of my last games assistant refereeing, when I did actually have a bump, like the next day my hips, I was like, oh, my hips are a bit sore today. And that was like pretty much it. And then there was like one game when I was like 5 months, I was refereeing a men's game at Maidenhead, and my dad came to watch, and I felt like my top was a little bit tighter, and I was like, Dad, do I look fat? Like, do I look pregnant? And they're like, just back on, Holly, is that like you're still skinny? Like no one knows.
That's so funny.
But yeah, my last couple of games probably sore hips were the biggest challenge. In terms of like mindset and everything, like nothing changed. I was super lucky.
And then when you did have to take a step back from refereeing, was that a challenge in itself? Did you miss it, or was it very much like, actually no, like I need to do this now and it's like the right thing to do?
I think like it wasn't challenging in the respect that like I like miss refereeing, like I was like, okay, like I'm going to enjoy this journey and whatnot, but I suppose it gave me a bit more hunger to like carry on training and to get back. It's like I'm gonna go against what every like natal exercise person stays, and I was like training to have a good birth. Like I was like, this is athletic for me. Which like nobody, like no other woman should think like that. I think I was just a bit weird. But like I was training, like I was training hard, like everything that I could do, because my goal was to get back on the pitch for the start of the season, and that would like I got back on the pitch like mid-August for pre-season friendlies, and then gave birth at the start of June. So yeah, it was for me. It was the next step was to like, right, let's train hard now to make recovery easier.
That is really quick though. Fair play. Did you feel okay going back, or
I felt like I felt again like I felt good, like I felt fit, and I thought I was in a really good place. And then I like had like no issues and everything, and then I blew the whistle, and then I pissed myself a little bit.
Oh no!
all over me.
Oh God, something you wouldn't even think of happening.
Yeah,
Oh,
didn't even
God.
think. I was like, thank God I've got black shorts on. But I was there like, right, need to work on this. And then it happened like maybe like 3 more times, and then we were sweet.
Oh God. Oh, funny. Go on.
Oh, yeah. And then, so then looking post-pregnancy, what, obviously I mentioned earlier kind of about how being a mum maybe has impacted your decision-making as a referee. Has there been like any sort of challenges balancing work and family life? I know you mentioned that basically it's all kind of just gone into one, so to say.
Yeah.
But has there been any like difficulties or finding that like perfect balance? Because obviously you said you still work as well. Is there firstly, just how does that all kind of come together?
Yeah, I suppose like the biggest challenge is just logistics. All our family is scattered all over the country, which helps in some respects because like rugby's all over the country. But yeah, just finding people to like come to my games, have him on the sideline. Like my husband referees as well, so and usually like we're sent to different parts of the country. So he'll either like he can go with him to games if like it's closer to my mum and dad or whatnot. And then like this season, for example, like we've got a Saturday nanny, a local girl who will come to games with me. Like if there's no family, but that's just adding like another person in to like help alleviate any stresses. So like we'll get like sorted out with like who's coming to what rugby game, like probably like 6 weeks in advance, like a month in advance of like actually like games happening.
So with you like saying that, was it, you obviously said then you planned 6 weeks in advance. Was that something that you kind of had to learn to do, or was it different at the start and you kind of realised actually this isn't working, we need to sort ourselves out a little bit?
Yeah. I think like I very much like will live like week to week. Like you'll ask me like, oh, what are you doing tomorrow? But I like don't ask me like I don't know.
Yeah.
So in terms of like being organised, like in personal life, like it's definitely a work in progress as such. But I would say at the start of this season, like I've been a lot better. But last year it would be there like, what are you doing next weekend? Like, can you come to this game with me? Whereas like now, getting a bit more organised, which I suppose is a good life skill to have.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely agree with that 100%. And do you think that is kind of helped, again, refereeing performance, having everything organised and kind of not as stressful like behind the scenes, or?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely would subconsciously, like, I wouldn't like outwardly show like stress or any pressure because like I'd always get things done eventually. But yeah, I suppose like it would have like a subconscious impact, definitely.
Mentioning like a couple of things like before with like attitudes and stuff like that within the game. I know if we kind of have a like an outspect on football, definitely is very much still of it's a woman, the women are playing kind of thing, which I think is a bit like it's unfair, like completely unfair. How do you think that gets better, or do you think that's different with rugby? That maybe like obviously with football having it, it's the women's game. But then, do you think it is like that with rugby, or do you think there's a lot more kind of respect shown towards it?
I think there's definitely respect in the language that people use, but I wouldn't say like attitudes are different. Like if you go to a men's like Six Nations game, you look around, all you can see is like a green sea of Barber jackets and like blokes necking pints of Guinness, you know. Whereas if you like go to a women's game, like everyone's like in an England shirt, like painted faces. There's loads and loads of families and kids. So like it's I think the nice thing about it, and it's the same in football as well, is that women's sport just attracts a completely different audience, and it attracts a very family friendly audience. So yeah, I think it does. It's just a different, like at the end of the day, like women's football, women's rugby, and compared to men's, like it's a different product and it has to be treated as a different product. Like you can't go out and look for the same sponsors for a men's team as you would a women's team. Like the PWR like have Clinique as their like player of the match sponsor, whereas like I'm not really sure what the men's have, but they certainly wouldn't go out and look for Clinique as a sponsor. So yeah, I think there's similar attitudes in the people that are making decisions, your traditional fan, but in terms of like a different fan base, like it's certainly, I think it's quite separate.
How do you think those attitudes improve? Is it kind of just a more of like, obviously saying social media earlier, but like actually like getting down to how do those attitudes get better? Is it just more of a showcasing, this is what we can do, this is the quality we can produce, and kind of along those lines, or is it, do you think, something different?
I think it's partly generational. Like when those traditional rugby football fans aren't with us anymore in like, I don't know, 70 years time, and the evolution of women's sport now and the amount of girls playing sport, like that's only going to evolve and change over time. So one, it's generational. And then two, I think it's the professionalization of sport and making the brand on and like how the sport is played better. And you're only going to do that by professionalizing sports teams. So yeah, I think it's going to, obviously, like it will take time and everything, but I think those are probably the two main factors.
Do you feel like it's a positive thing actually to have that divide of like you said, the women's game sponsored by Clinique and then they bring in different audiences? Do you think it's actually positive to have that separation for now, where we're like, this is the women's audience, this is what the women's game brings in, versus like the traditions of men? Or do you think it's more beneficial to treat the men and women's game exactly equally and for each club have the same sponsors and things? What do you think about that? Like, what's...
Yeah, I personally am in favour of treating them as different brands, because it is different. Like it's different style and type of playing the game, and I think it can only benefit a club because it just widens the amount of potential sponsors that they can go out to. If you look at a lot of blue chip brands, they're like what they're going for, like the diversity, sponsoring things outside the box, looking at women's sport, looking at all sorts. Like I think it ticks a lot of boxes that men's sport just can't tick. Like men's sport will be more those traditional, like I don't know, like a big financial company type brand, because that's what their board of directors are traditional rugby fans. Where if you go to like a tech company, that's bit more innovative, like does has like a big agenda on like women in tech, for example. Like I think it just brings more opportunity if you separate the two.
No, I completely agree, because I think some people are of the opinion that you shouldn't say like men's game and women's game. It should just be rugby, and then you can see who's playing if it's like a man or a woman. But I do think that it is important to like drive those audiences by actually treating them differently and like bringing in different, like you said, like sponsors and audiences. So yeah, it is interesting to see your perspective on that.
I do think it, like the men's Six Nations has just rebranded to Men's Six Nations, and the logo is very similar to what the women's is. And like on like LinkedIn and stuff, like you've got people commenting saying they don't like it, just call it rugby, like men's rugby was first and everything. Like the women's Six Nations isn't as old as ours, and I'm like, just get out.
It's your time to go.
2020. I'm getting 2025 now. Like you're gonna have to get used to it, because it's the way that the world is. Like you need to evolve your attitudes and stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Definitely.
And did you have to deal with maybe like constant setbacks or kind of attitudes towards you, but like personally, have you, going through your career, had to deal with any of that stuff? Or not really? You obviously said you can get away with a lot of stuff because being a female referee, especially in the men's game, but were there a lot of challenges to overcome?
I would say like actually like refereeing and like going up the levels, like I did it very quickly, and I attribute that to two things. Probably being a woman, like positive sexism, but also being an ex-player. I would say the biggest challenge now is the fact that like I'm not fully contracted, whereas there's male fully contracted referees that haven't done as many test matches as me. And that is, for me, it's institutionalised gender inequality within the RFU, that they're not thinking like that. So that's me fighting the good fight at the moment. But yeah, the setback now is come when you're at the top end of the game and them not treating me equally to a male counterpart who's doing the same thing in the men's game.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that, obviously you said it needs to change, how quickly do you think that can change?
For me, it's a couple of decisions by key people within unions. But those people have to want to change and go against what they've always done. I think like unions are still quite archaic places, and there's a lot of red tape because of the way that they're governed and everything and who they're boarded by. So yeah, it just takes, for me, it just takes a few people to just want to think differently. But for a bloke to go in and do that and ask for this, it's a lot easier for them to get that than it is for me.
Did you have to actively seek a union, or did you know that there was like union support there for you? How did that work?
So it just so like when you like go through refereeing, like you're part of like your county, and then as soon as you hit like National League, then you come under like England Rugby.
Okay.
So then now like I'm in like the National League and then the professional game match officials group. So I'm pretty much like fully under like England Rugby now.
Okay, makes sense.
How important is it for you and other females to keep be given like bigger opportunities? Obviously, we saw recently, I was thinking it was Holly Davison leading the first all-women game in a European Championship, I believe. But how important is it for like females to keep be given those stages to showcase, what we're as good,
I think
if not better?
It is important, but I think it can't be like a token. Like it has to be like their part. They're there because they deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's getting that balance right of identifying which females that they like want to push into like those men's international spaces. But it's doing it because there's a long-term plan.
Yeah.
They're good enough and they're there on their own merit rather than just being female.
I think that's a big thing with like pundits and commentary and stuff. Oftentimes there's like females who are just put in as a token, and then they get more hate because maybe they're not as clued up as like someone else, and then that's where the hate comes from, because they're like, they've just been put in because they're a female, whereas there's actually plenty of females who can do just as good as a job as a man, but you've just got to find them and like choose people with that knowledge. And it's better to have no female at all than a female who's representing with like the under education and all, just feeding into those stereotypes, I suppose. But yeah, I think that's a big thing in the industry in general, to be honest.
I think there's always going to be like, even if a female's more qualified and better than a male, they're always going to get hate.
Yeah, definitely.
Just because they're a female in the male-dominated sport, So I think there is always going to be abuse. But I think good thing about females in sport is that like you haven't got to where you are because you give up on the first hurdle, So like if you look at Alex Scott, for example, like when she started her punditry post playing for Arsenal, like the amount of abuse that she gets, and now look where she is. She's on TV representing game shows and doing everything. So yeah, it's good to see, obviously.
And then for your ambitions, where do you want to go? Obviously, Sarah Cox, the only professional female referee in England. Is that professional side something you think you can achieve? And then how far from that then do you see yourself going? Like, kind of what are your personal ambitions? How far do you want to go as a referee?
Like I definitely want to get a full-time contract. Like there's no like question around that. But I think for me, like the stage that I am in my career, like I'm 32 years old, so I've got to be realistic. So if I do like the next 2 Women's World Cups, and then like I would dabble in the men's game. Like if I got into the men's Premiership, amazing. Championship at like championship at a minimum. But I think long term, I think all the stuff that I've had to come over, like the pregnancy stuff, like the stuff around contracts now, like arguments over like pay inequality and everything with the RFU, like I definitely would love to go into like a strategic role so that females don't have to go through that, like put me in place who knows, who's lived and breathed it for the last 10 years refereeing, and then just making sure that there's strategies and there's procedures and there's pathways and everything in place so that it doesn't have to happen again. Sarah Cox got contracted 9 years ago, and there's been no other female contracted in 9 years. Like, for me, that's a problem. And there's nobody currently looking to fix it. So yeah, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, it's 9 years. That's a very long time for it to not have another one. And then quickly, as we just kind of get towards the end of this call, I just wanted to talk a little bit about like mental toughness in general. Like you saying that very much you're a very strong-minded person anyway, but do you think that's something that you've always had with you, or do you think as you got older and you've overcome certain things, that mental toughness of yourself is improved and has got up to a point where it's actually like one of your best skills?
Yeah, I think I've always had it, but it's probably just like matured over the years. Like I come from like both my parents were military, like it was a very like black and white household, you know. So you grow up with an element of that. Like I've had big injuries in my time, like I've done both my knees, shoulder, like that takes a lot of time out, a lot of resilience to come back and everything. So like that mental toughness I've always had, but at the moment, like it's just evolving to how do you put that into a refereeing capacity, like when you need it. So yeah, I think it's always been there. I blame my parents for that.
Do you think the skills from rugby as well helps you in kind of everyday life, not necessarily the other way around where like your skill sets benefited you as a rugby player and a referee, but do you think the skills rugby has taught you as a sport have helped you with everyday life?
Yeah, I think anyone who takes part in a high performance sport, there's so many soft transferable skills, but I think rugby in comparison, like the teamwork element, the respect, everything that it brings, like it's definitely helps in day-to-day life. And I think like I'm outside of refereeing, like I still work in sport, and to have been in a male dominated sport, and then the sport industry is very male dominated anyway, like it's always a conversation starter because they're like, you don't look like you played rugby, and I'm like, well, I did, so we can talk about that. So yeah, it's always a good conversation starter.
And then obviously last question before the call goes, with your experience of living in different cultures, you obviously lived in England, France, Australia, and then if I believe I did my research right, you lived in the Middle East for a little bit. How do you think those experiences of living in different cultures have helped as well within rugby, but also as a person?
Yeah, I think like probably France was the most challenging one. Like I was the only English speaker in a French team, and like if I got like weekends away, like if you went and played up in Cannes, like you're there the whole weekend, and I couldn't speak any French, and like Toulousians don't like the English, so that was probably like the biggest challenge, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do it really, just because of that element of it, learn a bit of French, but also be like really outside your comfort zone. I think people can get very comfortable in rugby environments, like say if you played for a team for 10 years and it's what you know, this is what you do, but the importance of going out, playing for different teams, traveling the world as much as you can with your sport, like is only going to broaden your horizons, and you get to make friends all over the world, and sport does take you places. So yeah, I think it's taught me a lot, but mostly just getting outside the comfort zone and using sport as a driver.
Definitely. Amazing. I think that was a perfect question to end it off on. I want to thank Holly for coming on. It's been a really, really interesting episode for me. I've learned a lot as well. I want to thank Niamh for coming on as well.
Thank you for having
be
me.
sure to check out the rest of the episodes that will be coming out very, very soon. But that's all from us today. Thank you for listening and goodbye.
Bye.